The Monte and the Pharaoh Show is brought to you by...
Because wine is your second favorite four-letter word. California wine, New York attitude. Good fucking wine.
Yeah.
From there, a few years later, then I got into booking guys, but that took time to do. I met Sims through that. Eric Sims, I know, a good friend of the show. Eric Sims would bring in like Sid and stuff. He was like the middleman to get them the acts. Sims definitely was around for that, and would vouch for everything I'm telling you.
Now, were you a wrestling fan growing up?
Yeah, I was forced to watch wrestling growing up. My father would force me to watch wrestling, but I liked it. Don't get me wrong, I liked it. I was forced.
What do you mean? What do you mean by forced, Richie? Like get in here, eat these donuts, and watch this.
You're gonna sit down. You're gonna sit down. You're gonna watch this, and that's that.
What? You will watch wrestling now.
Your father rules. I mean, my God, that's awesome. He could have been forcing you to watch something a lot worse. My Lord.
Well, you're like, Dad, I'm watching porn right now. I'd rather not watch wrestling.
I'm watching porn? Wait a minute. How old were you when the forced wrestling stopped? I mean, my God. Were you like 16 when you finally was able to leave? I want to watch boxing, Dad.
All right, guys, hold on. I got a good call here. I need you guys to partake in this. Hold on.
Richie, what is Mike up to? What do you mean you got to have a phone call?
James, how are you?
Good. Sorry about that. I was getting to a rest stop. I'm traveling, but what's the latest?
Well, what's the latest? You're on air with Monte the Pharaoh, so I figured why not get you on?
Something. This is like Christmas. The greatest and most legitimate wrestling show, podcast, netcast anywhere in the country. This is a treat for me. In fact, I'm actually in a rest area right now, traveling, and I'm currently taking all my clothes off.
That's what we're talking about. So we have a wrestling vendor on by the name of Richie Sorrentino, and Richie was having some communication problems. I said, you know what? James was just calling during the show. Let's get him on. So, James, what's new in the world of private investigating?
Well, I don't know how many of you saw this, but there was a little episode of The Dark Side of the Ring on last Tuesday, which was about the Billy Jack Haynes alleged murder. That was the third show that I've worked on, and I pitched that idea to them. So the three that I've worked on in 3 different seasons would have been Jake the Snake Roberts and his missing sister. The second one was Doink the Clown, the Matt Thorne episode. And the third one was the Billy Jack Haynes. I pitched them about 5 or 6 other episodes, but they seemed hell-bent on looking into something called Dark Side of the Cage. They're really big in the Dark Side of the Cage, but I did the show. It aired on Tuesday. I was very, very pleased with it. The producers did I thought, a good job. I mean, they got some timeline stuff wrong, but they're not wrestling people. And guys, what I think is going on, I've heard a lot of complaints from some of the other podcasts and stuff, which I wish more people would call me about it, because I would give them direct access to the episodes I worked on and the episodes that are coming even next year, is that I think they're shooting more. It's 70-30. It should be 90-10. It should be 90% content for wrestling fans and 10% true crime. And it's like 70% true crime, 30% wrestling fans. They got the dates that Billy Jack Haynes was wrong, and he was in the WWE, and how he broke into the business. And they got to fit it into 43 minutes. And it's just, but the novice fans that watch it for true crime that's never heard of the Portland Territories or Billy Jack Haynes or Hercules Hernandez or any of these people, Jim Cornette, they're happy just to watch a documentary about a guy who lost his fucking mind. And the stuff that they asked me to look up in as a private investigator and work on in that show was more Billy Jack Haynes' marital status, where he went to high school, people that knew him in high school, his family members. And I'll tell you what, the shit that I was involved in the Billy Jack Haynes was far more interesting than what you saw on television.
Can you enlighten us a little on what you discovered?
Well, I'll give you a great one, and I'm glad you asked, guys. So Billy Jack Haynes was married several times. So we also know that he was married or with a female wrestler. Her name escapes me, who also dated the gentleman Chris Adams. And I was married to him. There's a whole story about that.
That would be Lady Blossom.
There you go. I'm glad you guys filled in the blanks. Now, that wasn't what I was interested in. What I was interested in was a marriage that he had right around when he was in the Florida territories. What a lot of people don't remember about Billy Jack Haynes is he was bigger than Dusty Rhodes in the mid-'80s in Florida. He was massive. He was a superstar. But he was only a superstar for like maybe about 6 to 9 months. He always wore out his welcome real quick or quit and left. But he was over huge in Tampa. That's where I grew up. I had heard that he had been married to a woman that was not a wrestler, and they owned a bodybuilding gym together in the Tampa Bay area. And it lasted maybe 2 years, which is one of the motivations to quit. So what I did was I was able to track down his wife, and I'll give the name off the air to you guys, but I was able to track down a woman that was married to him for several years who had nothing to do with the wrestling business. And they opened up a gym together in Tampa. I don't believe this made the episode. And what was interesting is I tried to reach her. Couldn't get her. Finally got a hold of her 2 sons who were in their mid and early 20s. And I said, I'm trying to reach your mom. And they said, why? And I said, well, I'm with Dark Side of the Ring and professional wrestling, and I'm a private investigator, and I want to talk to her about her marriage to Billy Jack Haynes. And what was crazy is they go, who the fuck is Billy Jack Haynes, and when was mom married? And I says, wait a minute, you guys don't know your mom was married in 1986? They go, Dad. So their father comes over and they go, was mom married before you? They had no idea that mom had been married. So the next thing these 2 kids do while I'm on the phone, after one of them gets done basically crying, is saying, what's the name of the guy that she was married to? Like, was it Hulk Hogan? Was it? And I said, no, Billy Jack Haynes. Well, you Google him. And these kids were mortified, absolutely terrified. And they said, mom was it? So now their dad's like, well, yeah, we never really talked about it. She was married for 18 months. They had also the woman that he was married to and her current husband, who is a very affluent, he does something with the medical field. I don't know if he runs hospitals or something in Tampa. They had no idea that Billy Jack Haynes was incarcerated for a possible murder charge. They just knew who he was. So now the family, her current husband and her 2 current children are going ballistic because this was like some deep, dark family secret. That was not my intent. So no matter where I turned in the Billy Jack Haynes case, I found an uncle of his that was in a nursing home. Billy Jack Haynes, that turned out it wasn't really his uncle. He had stated that he was this big high school athlete in college, and it didn't quite work out. I don't believe he ever really graduated from high school. So there was some inconsistencies. And the number one guy that I told them to call was Len Denton, which is also known as the Grappler. He was the guy with the loaded boot. So he was very helpful in filling in the gaps up there in Portland. But yeah, that was one that definitely sticks out in my mind, is this family is now devastated because they didn't know their mom. I mean, imagine if I called one of you guys up and said, hey, by the way, do you know your mom was married to superstar Billy Graham? You'd be like, wait, what? That's kind of what happened. So that was maybe not the biggest wrestling angle in this thing, but definitely something in real life that you don't see on the show.
Well, it's definitely a much better story too. That's unbelievable. They let that one slide. That is pretty cool.
Yeah, they had no idea. And guys, I'll answer any and all questions because there's very few people that answer questions about Dark Side of the Ring. And I don't produce it. I don't make the ideas other than I pitch them ideas. And they've taken all 3 of the ideas. In fact, in the episode about halfway through, they said that somebody called and solicited the Billy Jack Haynes story. They're referring to me, and of course I'm in the credits. But I never make it on camera. Billy Jack Haynes, very, very, very strange story, and easily could be an 8-part series. So could Jake the Snake. So could Matt Bourne. Most of these you can't fit into 42 minutes, and somehow they're doing it.
Well, and the reality of it, they could really make the Billy Jack Haynes story a movie. You know, you put the wrestling aside, you don't really need the wrestling, from the drug usage to the murders and the craziness behind him. I mean, we had him in studio. Good. I was just saying, we had him in studio twice. Always a gentleman, but honestly, a little bit crazy, right?
Well, let me tell you something that didn't make Dark Side of the Ring, and people were scared to talk about this, and this has never been released. Thank you, ma'am. No, you're okay. This has never been released. There was a female producer that worked on it. The same woman that did the Chris Adams documentary, I call them documentaries on Dark Side of the Ring, also did the Billy Jack Haynes one. I worked with her. It's a different production company this year. You can see that it's kind of changing a little bit. It looks a little bit different. So that lady contacted me and said, hey, I heard you pitch this. Can you help me? Definitely. So what's really interesting about the Billy Jack Haynes story is one of the things that I went down is I had found some inside information that when Billy Jack Haynes was in the Tampa territories, and you guys are better at this than I am, you tell me what dates he was there, 84 to 86, or maybe it was 83 to 85. I'm not sure. There were a lot of people that, and the dark side of the ring wanted me to look into this, that he was a drug mule for the for Florida Championship Wrestling. So Graham, the oldest Graham, the promoter, basically they believed at the port of Tampa was bringing in drugs, and Billy Jack Haynes was his muscle. So what he would do is he would send Billy Jack Haynes and some other goons down there, just like they did in Arkansas, and he would pick up drugs off the dock. So he was making 3 times more money picking up and running drugs from the dock through the Grahams than he was wrestling. Wrestling was like it would be like if you were a school teacher, then after school you wait tables. His main meat and potatoes was supposedly drug muling. Now, Graham, the promoter, is a very beloved figure in wrestling. McMahon got a lot of his ideas from him. He's one of the few promoters you don't hear a lot of bad stuff about, even though there's 4 generations of suicide in that family, which was on Dark Side of the Ring. So for some reason, Dark Side of the Ring had kind of a hard-on for the Graham family. So I tracked that story down. I spoke with Len Denton. I spoke with, who's the guy that ratted out wrestling on 2020? Not David Schultz.
Eddie Mansfield.
Eddie Mansfield. And I've talked to Eddie Mansfield a lot, and I'll give you an Eddie Mansfield story here in a second. And I spoke to a lot of these people, and they said, hey, listen, on the record, I don't know what you're talking about. Off the record, yeah, we believe that Billy Jack Haynes came in, and he would go down to the port and mule those drugs, or he was the muscle for the mules. And that money that was being made under the table was being funneled right through Florida Championship Wrestling. I kind of stayed on that for a couple of days. And then a lot of the people that were involved in that were either long gone, didn't want to talk about, or involved political figures, former mayors, former principals of schools, former football coaches at the University of Tampa. Paul Orndorff was in that area at the time. So there was a lot of that. And that never made the show. And that could have been a whole thing, because if that's true, and if you look at Mike Graham, he committed. Is it Mike Graham? Who was the senior? Who was Mike Graham? Might have been his son.
So Eddie Graham was the promoter. Mike Graham was his son.
Graham.
Yep.
Okay, and Eddie Graham, Mike Graham, and even Mike Graham's son have all committed suicide. If you look at that, they said he was involved in some business deals that involved property. The Mulligans were involved in that, and counterfeit money and property they were purchasing. There's a bunch of different stories there. All the wrestlers that were main attractions in Florida Championship Wrestling in the mid-90s all were involved in extremely fraudulent crimes, like bizarre shit that involved counterfeit money, but Graham never got caught with that. But at the end of his life, I think there was something that was going to get to him. Now they say it had to do with property, and maybe he swindled people on properties or whatever. But it might have been the drug thing, Kerry Von Erich. Same thing. He had the drug deal. So that was another thing that I chased down, and it was either going to be too big, and we needed a hell of a lot more. But guys, we're talking 40 years ago. There's not too many people 40 years ago that are willing to talk about that now, and anybody who would have been in their 50s or 60s back then is long gone.